shall we say, and were completely mystified by it. And to hear that you were actually in town and might be able to come in and have a word for us about it was great news to our ears. So tell us, because obviously this is an area of great specialization for you, you know a great deal about it. My understanding of US immigration law to date was that it worked pretty much as you would expect immigration law to work anywhere else. There are procedures that you go through where you can apply for a green card, which you have to go through a number of obvious tests to qualify for, which allows you residential status, and thereafter it makes you legally permanently resident, and then thereafter you can apply for full-blown US citizenship if you wish. And we know lots of Ghanaians' enthusiasm for green card lotteries, etc. So say me as an individual, I visit the United States, I go to visit family because of a family emergency, or just on holiday, there's a family emergency, so I have permission to stay. A normal visa for holiday purposes would entitle you to stay how long exactly in the United States?
Well, it depends on the entry, your entry at the time of admission to the United States. Usually, the visa could be given to you to stay up to 6 months, but some officers have the discretion to reduce the number of days that a visitor can stay.
Right.
So it can be from 1 day up to 6 months. The usual time is 6 months. It is only when officers have a reason to believe that you may have other intent, and therefore they try to restrict the 6 months which is allowed for you to visit. Mm-hmm. There are others who actually come in with a temporary visas who are given what is called a duration of status. For example, if you're a government official on an A1 visa traveling to the United States for government purposes, some diplomats also have conferences with the UN. They give them duration of status, meaning that you are there until you are done with the purpose for which brought you there. So it depends, but I would say that you did mention that there are new changes to immigration laws happening, and you were surprised to hear the most recent executive order from the Trump administration. I will tell you, seasoned practitioners like myself are still struggling to keep up with the changes, because it comes mostly even on a daily basis. And it is not only through the immigration law. We have laws from the State Department that also affects immigration law. We have laws that deals with Homeland Security that also affect immigration law. And then we have the immigration law itself. Department of Justice also have rules that also impact on immigration law. So it is a constant onslaught, and we are overwhelmed, if I should use that phrase.
I can only imagine. But this latest regulation announced, or should I say rule, which requires foreign nationals staying for more than 30 days to register with the federal government. What basis did the announcement of the rule take? It's not another executive order, is it?
Well, it is an executive order passed on January 25th, and this is his executive order 141509. And the title of the executive order is simply Protecting the American People Against Invasion.
Against invasion?
Yes. That is the title of the executive order.
Invasion, not evasion. I-N-V-A-S-I-O-N. Invasion.
Yes. That is the title of the executive order, which has brought about the requirement for aliens to register in the United States. So if you have not seen that executive order, please go back. Whoever is listening,
141509.
Yes, go back and read that executive order. And basically what it says is that every person in the United States who is not a citizen or permanent resident has to register in order for the U.S. government to know that you are physically present in the United States. Now, the reason why you are hearing about this rule recently is that as soon as the executive order was passed, immigration activists filed a lawsuit to block the order. The ruling came out on April 11th from the D.C. Circuit, which allowed the government to implement the executive order.
So the Washington Circuit Court has essentially authorized the operation of this executive order.
Exactly, because usually when an executive order is passed by the government, by the president, the various agencies have to implement the rule. So there was an interim rule developed by the U.S. Department of Homeland Security to implement this executive order. And when the interim rule came out, a lawsuit was filed to block the implementation. And finally, a ruling came out on April 11th. And it is not the only one. There are so many things I'll talk about, even what has happened just this week.
Well, I just wanted to ask you in relation to that, with this circuit, DC Circuit Court ruling that you described there, does that in any way put an end to the possibility of further, say, immigration rights groups bringing further lawsuits against the implementation of the executive order?
Well, usually what happens is that when a trial court, and in this instant case, the first level of attack to the executive order, when you lose, you can go on an appeal, and then the final appeal will rest with the Supreme Court. It depends on how much you want to fight and how well you are resourced to fight. But the fight against most of Trump's policies by lawyers has also exposed lawyers to serious threats to their liberty in the United States.
Really?
Yes. When I say liberty, law firms have actually been punished for representing issues that opposes the Trump administration, including immigration. And immigration lawyers have been one on the chopping board for some time.
Punished in what way, sir?
Some of the big law firms that actually opposes or represent clients some of them have had their security clearance revoked so that they cannot do any business with the government. Some of them have contracts with the government. The contract has been revoked. Some of them in fact, some of the NGOs had funding from the federal government to represent immigrant groups. Those funding has been cut, so lawyers have been laid off. It is an onslaught. So I am not very confident that a lot of law firms are willing to take up some of these courses in order to go up higher to the Supreme Court level. Some of them will just end at the trial court, as this particular instant case.
Don't put up any resistance and don't make yourself a target.
Exactly.
In other words. You describe a frightening situation, pretty much, Eric Okyere Darko. I wondered if I could ask you in relation to the fundamentals of U.S. policy. So this is an executive order. It overrides previous legislation. It doesn't need to go through through Congress. Doesn't need passage from anyone. It's the president's writ ruling. But what does it mean in real terms when it comes to the position of foreigners in the United States? I mean, leave aside the irony of this being the United States of America we're talking about, the melting pot of the world, God's own nation, founded by immigrants from all four corners of our planet. Its wealth founded on the labor of people from all over the world. Some of its leading industries today, Silicon Valley, dependent on imported labor, as well as the sweat end of its labor, the Mexican nannies and farm workers or whatever, who keep its agriculture and its domestic arrangements nice and cozy in places like California and the southern United States. Leave aside that irony. What does it mean in real terms? Say, if you were a student You've applied for a place in college. You've maybe already been in the United States a year. Normally, for most people on student visas going to the United States, they don't have a green card, do they?
No.
Does their student visa make them legally permanent residents?
So I would just discuss briefly what this executive order actually does. It sounds very scary. It looks like it's affecting everybody, but it is not. In fact, part of Trump's administration policy is to shock people, scare people, and probably people to decide that I'm even leaving the country on my own. Maybe you may not even be affected by the policy at all. So what this actually does is that every alien in the United States has to register, or the government must know about your presence in the United States. That means if you are entering the United States legally, you're already documented.
Right.
So it doesn't even affect you.
No, but you said earlier on that the order applies to people who are non-green card holders and who are not legally permanent residents.
No. Of course, green card holders are permanent residents. They are
Right.
not required to register
Right.
because part of the process for green card is registration.
Right.
But in addition to that, there are a lot of people who are actually registered by virtue of being in the United
You'd have
States.
thought, like students.
Yes. So once you enter as a student, you have F1 status. You are legal in the United States. You are not a legal permanent resident, but you are legal because you are there for a lawful purpose and you have been granted the leave to stay for that particular purpose, hereby to study. If you are there as a visitor, you are legal in the United States. You've been granted permission to come and visit up to the duration that has been given to you. And you have actually been registered because at the time you arrive at the port of entry, the immigration officers collect some information from you, and that is a form of registration. Those who actually cross the border illegally, who encounter border patrol agents and are processed, fingerprinted, and sometimes issued with what is called a notice to appear, meaning that you need to justify why you should be allowed to stay in the United States. They have also been processed.
You've gone through a form of registration.
Yes. So those who are not registered technically are those who came without a visa or with somebody else's visa and they were not detected. So you cross the border without being encountered. You come to the United States with somebody else's identification. This small group of people, that is what this law actually applies to them.
So if it's not to be interpreted literally to apply to large numbers of people who may not be green card holders or citizens.
Exactly.
You're suggesting that in effect it's a kind of amnesty, but an amnesty with fear written all over it to encourage people either just to leave of their own volition if they're not legally resident, or to put themselves forward and register.
Yes. I wouldn't even use the word amnesty because amnesty has a very positive connotation, which this present policy of the government frowns upon. So
right.
That word is even out. But this is a way for you to register, to tell the U.S. government that I am in your country and I am illegal, basically, because you have not registered. You don't have validity to be in the country. So it exposes you to the government of the United States to know that I am here and this is my biographic information, this is where I live, this is what I am doing in the United States. If they choose to enforce any immigration consequences, actions against you, they have the right to come for you because now they know about you and they know where you are. So that is basically the purpose of the registration. The idea is to identify people who are there and be able to go after them if they want to go after you.
So, this sounds counterintuitive because what person who is an illegal alien resident in the United States and knowing the current climate, and as you said, an atmosphere where the basis of immigration policy, all policy it seems, including U.S. trade policy, seems to change from one moment to the next. Which person, knowing that this is not an official amnesty saying come forward, declare yourself an illegal alien, and we will go through processes to register you and give you the right to remain provided you satisfy certain conditions, which person would seriously put themselves forward and want to register under the new executive order?
Number one, there is no right to remain in the United States by registering. In fact, the law clearly tells you that this doesn't confer any rights on you.
Right.
But you have the edge, you have the momentous to register, because there's both civil punishment and criminal punishment for not registering. You can be imprisoned up to 6 months, and you can be fined also for each day that you have not registered.
Is this the $998, or is that a daily fine?
No, the $998 is for those who have removal orders against them and have not left the country. That's right. A different group of people.
Okay.
But I think that the fee here is about $500 and change a day.
A day?
Yes. And also the law also allows the government to file a forfeiture action against you to seize your assets.
That charge per day, it's from the date of your registration to the point of removal.
Yes. So if you have money in the bank account, you've saved some money, the government can decide to take that money also from you as punishment. So it is advisable that you register, because the consequences for not registering probably outweighs the consequences of registering. Yes. And that is what it is. So this is just that part of the law. But there has been several, just within this week, that has also come to bear on immigrants.
Tell us a little bit about the new developments.
Well, this week...
This week alone?
This week alone. In fact, I left the U.S. on the 11th. This Friday. So this Friday morning, 3 a.m., I received a message that was sent to me, and not only to me, but most immigration practitioners and their clients. And it is basically telling you that your time is up and you must leave the United States.
I beg your pardon?
Yes. In fact, it is actually targeted towards recipients of temporary protective status, which was granted to people from Cuba, people from Haiti, Venezuela, and I believe El Salvador. It's about 4 countries where during Biden's administration as a temporary protected status was granted to them because of what was happening in their countries.
This is in America's backyard, and civil problems, political problems.
Yes. For Haiti, for example, had both the earthquake and also had the military coup that almost tore the country apart. So it's a humanitarian program that is run by every government in the United States. It granted temporary protection for these people from these countries, including even family members who were in those settings, who have relatives in the United States who have petitions pending in order to keep them safe. The total almost about 900,000 of them. And the protection gives you employment authorization and gives you the right to be in the United States until you find alternative way to adjust your status. Now, long story short, this is the tone of the message that I did receive. And with your permission, I just want to read just a few lines for you to see what it's talking about. Notice of termination of parole. And this is dated April 11th, 2025. It is time for you to leave the United States. That's the first line. You are currently here because the Department of Homeland Security paroled you into the United States for a limited period. DHS is now exercising its discretion to terminate your parole. Unless it expires sooner, your parole will terminate 7 days from the date of this notice.
7 days?
Yes. If you do not depart the United States immediately, in italics, you will be subject to potential law enforcement action that will result in your removal from the United States, unless you have otherwise obtained a lawful basis to remain here. Any other benefits you receive in the United States connected with your parole, such as work authorization, will also terminate. You will be subject to potential criminal prosecution, civil fines and penalties, and any other lawful options available to the federal government.
I'm sorry, you said you didn't receive that on the 1st of April.
On the 11th of April.
On the 11th of
This
April.
is not April Fool joke.
No, I was just checking.
I know. It is not April Fool joke. And, so in fact, when you receive this, and the last one is that, again, DHS is terminating your parole. Do not attempt to remain in the United States. The federal government will find you. Please depart the United States immediately.
DHS being the Department for Homeland Security.
Yes.
When it says parole, Mr. Okyere Darko, what is exactly does it refer to?
So the parole is a humanitarian program which is granted to certain countries
exception.
that are going through war, famine, natural disasters. It gives them temporary protection, and it is always extendable, renewable, depending on the circumstances in the country.
But you spoke about the Biden administration, sorry to interrupt you, having directed that at the 4 countries in America's backyard, as it were, the El Salvador's, Ecuador's, Haiti, and so on. Why does this apply to someone of your stature?
No, I believe I received it because I represent clients from within that group.
I see.
Yes, but it is not only these 4 countries who have parole. There are several other countries.
Right.
In fact, some African countries. Cameroon, for example, has parole.
Yeah, there was an arrangement until recently with South Sudan, I believe. It seems to have been revoked.
Yes, and all that. Yeah. So there are so many other countries who are not yet affected. But all these humanitarian programs probably can end as soon as possible.
And you're given 7 days to remove yourself from the United States.
Yes.
I mean, it beggars belief, and one can see why immigration lawyers like yourself are just scrabbling to keep up. But the whole world is scrabbling to keep up. And you spoke about perhaps the intended effect behind this Executive Order 1441509 against invasion of the United States. I'm sorry I giggle because it's not funny at all.
That is the title.
It is. It's perfectly serious, so I shouldn't giggle. But you speak of what you think is what the government wants the effect to be, or perhaps more importantly, what Donald Trump, because it is an executive order, wants the effect to be, and certain other figures around him we can imagine being quite happy at the effect of this. Do you expect this string of orders and announcements to have the desired effect? And secondly, where do you think it's going to end? At what point will the United States decide that it has reached a point of order in terms of its control over people invading its borders or coming across its borders?
Well, I will tell you, this is just 2 policies that I just told you about.
Off the cuff.
Yes, off the cuff. It is not the end of the policy that has come up recently. There are several of them. But you are talking about what are some of the effects that we think is going to happen. Well, our understanding is that within the farming sector, farmers are losing a lot because farm hands are very difficult now to come by. A lot of the laborers are not showing up to work, and the farmers are stuck with either their animals or their crops, and they need labor.
The orchards of California, all those Latinos flooding across the border.
Yes. The second one is the housing market. Most of the construction workers are not showing up, and it is going to get worse. I believe and I'm hoping that the care industry would eventually suffer also, because most of the immigrants are in the homes of the rich people, taking care of their babies and their parents,
nannies,
and
maid servants,
nursing homes,
elderly care.
Yes, definitely there's going to be a hit there. The hotel industry definitely is going to also suffer, and hospitality industry, with all these people leaving the country. And I'll tell you, some people have started leaving the country already, because if you will not have a source of income, I mean, there has been an increased enforcement of employment authorization verification by employers to make sure that you are legally allowed to work in the United States. So if you live in a country where you cannot work,
what's the point?
What's the point? You will end up leaving the country. Where you are in a country where children going to school, parents are afraid to escort their children to school because immigration can pick the parents up. Some kids have stopped going to school in some of the communities because they are afraid that their parents will not make it back home. So that is the type of environment that you find yourself in. Because we are in a very public space, I'm also limited to what I can say, even as an immigration lawyer, because it is not the usual America that we all know for the longest time. And the stress level is quite high within the immigrant community, and rightly so.
Rightly so, as you say. I mean, I wonder where this leaves people, because you hear, and just anecdotally, the accounts of even people who, for example, hold dual nationality. They might have one passport by virtue of descent. I know somebody who's of Indian descent, for example, was born in the United States and has lived there all her life, but I think has an Indian passport as well as her US passport, who is reluctant to travel at the moment because she's in a politically exposed group, shall we put it that way, not very much liked by the current political administration. She doesn't want to take a simple holiday coming up this spring because she's not sure about the basis of her return. Or people discovering the thing that here in Ghana we're familiar with people who have dual nationality using one passport to exit the country and another one to get back in, discovering that they're barred on their return because they've used their foreign passport in the United States to bypass a visa process to exit the country. So you get back to the United States thinking, I'm home, and you're told, no, you exited on this queer passport, please turn around and return to whence you came from. And that's what I mean about where do you see a logical end point to the current onslaught of changes?
I'll do a little bit of correction before we talk about the end point with regards to traveling on a dual passport situation. You can always return to the United States with your American passport. That the government has no right to take the passport from you without due process.
But I've heard anecdotally,
if you are leaving the country, that is where they apply the rule. When you are leaving the United States and you don't have a visa in your United States passport, that is when they will tell you you are not allowed to leave because you don't have a visa. And when you pull your second passport, they say, we don't recognize this. You are only a United States citizen. In fact, for the first time, I had to get a visa to come to Ghana.
Seriously?
Myself. Yes, to make sure that I don't fall short. Because I have clients who have gone through, they got to the airport and they were not allowed to board their flights. So those coming back home with the American passport, whether you left with a visa or not, shouldn't worry. But if you are in the U.S. and you are about to travel and you have your foreign passport, the airline can stop you from flying. That is how it is. The question is, what is the end game? When will the government feel it has arrived at a secured level of control? I believe when the inflow of black and brown people have reduced dramatically, that probably would be yes. I'm being honest with you.
You think, unfortunately, it's largely about race?
I would call it both race and class also. The government has reintroduced poverty guidelines, were mean tested admissions to the United States, which was introduced in the first Trump administration. Biden decided that public charge is no longer relevant. You cannot deny somebody from coming to the United States because he is likely to become a public charge. But it has been reintroduced, and you know what that means. People who don't have a lot of money would become subject to public charge. According to the rules, you have to show what you have. You have to show your medical conditions. You have to show your assets and your financial status, even as applying for permanent residency. So I believe that the aim is to reduce the population that the government sees most likely to ask for assistance when they are in the United States, vis-a-vis those who doesn't need it. And I believe most Europeans will not have to face this particular challenges, even when they are migrating to the United States. That for sure.
A shocking thought about where the times we're living in. I was going to say where we are heading towards, but it's actually happening now before our eyes, with immigration policy and the immigration status of lots of hard-working, ordinary people, not just seeking to make a better life for themselves, but actually providing invaluable services in the United States. One wonders particularly where all this tends to at a time when the United States is talking about dialing up its industrial base, previously outsourced to places like China.
Well, when you look at the educational sector, you can understand whether this policy of trying to build up its industrial base is consistent with what is happening. Look at what is happening within the educational sector of the United States. International students who became the bedrock of Silicon Valley are now under threat. One, for speaking up. If you say anything which is contrary to the policies of the present administration, your visa can be revoked and you may be deported from your studies. Two, universities are being attacked for their curriculum. Their vibrant teaching and diversity issues can no longer continue, including just yesterday what happened to Harvard University, where the government has decided to cancel 9.6 billion worth of
funding,
grant and funding to Harvard. For Harvard refusing to kowtow to the policies of this administration. Yes, it just happened yesterday.
I heard about University of Columbia, 400 million.
And almost all other universities have been targeted. So there are those who have actually agreed to implement those policies, and Harvard is the first to say we will not be ruled by a president because we're a private university and your policy is not our policy and you cannot tell us how to teach our students. So it is definitely going to affect scholarships to students coming to the United States. Definitely there will be no more enough funding by these universities to bring in extra talent that they used to always bring to the country. When you are there, there may be some issues you may not even be able to research on. If it borders on gender, race, inclusion, anything to do with climate change, that I mean, it's shocking. So it's definitely going to have a lot of impact.
So repercussions upon repercussions, and not just to movement of people, to also freedom of research, study, and what people can do in intellectual terms. The lifeblood of America, not only the labor forces, the cheap labor coming in, but the people buzzing with ideas and ability that have been the foundation of this great nation state.
Yeah.
So the words of the poem by Emma Lazarus, inscribed on the Statue of Liberty, go in part. Give me your tired, your poor, your huddled masses yearning to breathe free, the wretched refuse of your teeming shore. Send these, the homeless, tempest-tossed to me. I lift my lamp beside the golden door. What this new executive order makes of those words by Emma Lazarus, or what the importance of those words are today.
Thank you for watching. Like, comment, share, and subscribe.